Help me.
While the demolition work was underway at my son and his wife's home overseas, I heard a small girl's voice coming from somewhere. For a moment, I thought it was just my imagination, but just in case, I asked them to stop the work. Is anyone there? I walked toward the sound of the voice and noticed an old basement. Breaking the lock and entering, I found my 5-year-old granddaughter, who was supposed to have left this world 6 months ago, standing there. I instinctively hugged her tightly. Afterward, what I heard from her was so shocking that it filled me with rage, and I made a decision. I lost my husband, who was quite the drinker, 10 years ago. It was a challenging marriage, but with our 2 sons, I thought we were happy. After my husband passed away, I lived with my eldest son and his wife. They had been married for 8 years but had not been blessed with children. On the other hand, my younger son got married to his wife 5 years ago, and soon after, they had an adorable baby girl. Since they wanted more space to raise a family, my husband and I gave our old house to my younger son. It was about an hour's drive from my home, and my younger son would often bring my granddaughter to visit. However, after their second child, a boy, was born 2 years ago, our contact gradually decreased. I tried calling my younger son, but he only said he was busy, and I rarely got to see my grandchildren. Still, I never missed sending gifts for their birthdays. But I never heard back, and I only got to meet my grandson once when he was a newborn. I didn't even know how he had grown. Time passed, and after 2 years, my younger son finally called me.
Our boy is getting big, and we're planning a family trip overseas. What would you like as a souvenir?
Well, it would make me happy if you could just bring it over with Annabelle when you get back. More than the gift itself, I wanted to see my grandchildren, so I asked him that favor. It had been 2 years. Annabelle was 5 by now and must have become more like an older sister. I wondered if my grandson looked like my son when he was little. I imagined these things and, filled with excitement, counted down the days until their return. But a few days later, I received a call from my son while they were still on their trip.
Mom, Annabelle seems to have drowned in the sea. We can't find her.
What? What do you mean? His voice, which should have been filled with joy, was trembling, and I couldn't understand what had happened. According to him, my granddaughter had been playing by the sea when a large wave took her, and after a 3-day search, there was no sign of her. They had lost hope. I wanted to rush to their side, but without a passport, there was nothing I could do.
There are still things to take care of, so I'll call you again.
Unable to find any words, I fell silent, and with those parting words, he hung up. Has Annabelle really left this world? Confronted by a reality I didn't want to accept, I could only pray somewhere that she would be found safe and sound. The next day, my prayers went unanswered as my son called again.
We cut the trip short and returned home.
Can I come to your house now?
I'm sorry. Crystal is really down, so please leave us be.
I understand. It must be hard. Is there anything I can do?
We don't even have the strength for a funeral. I'll call again in a while.
I had so many questions, but considering how my son and his wife were feeling, I couldn't say anything more. All I could do was light a candle at home and press my hands together in prayer. Annabelle, please rest in peace." When I closed my eyes, her smiling face from the last time we met appeared in my mind, and tears began to flow. Even my elder son and his wife, who adored children and loved Annabelle, were deeply affected by this sad news, and the three of us grieved together. Worried about how my younger son and his wife were coping, I called several times. However, my son only responded with, "We still can't get our feelings in order." I couldn't do anything, so I just waited, hoping time would ease their pain. Half a year passed, spent soothing my aching heart, when my younger son suddenly called to inform me he had been assigned overseas.
Living in a house filled with memories of Annabelle is painful, so we've decided to tear it down.
Why not renovate and rent it out instead?
Mom, you don't understand our feelings at all. You're so insensitive.
I'm sorry. Realizing he was right, I reflected deeply. When are you leaving?
In 3 days. We're tearing down the house the day after that.
The abruptness of it all left me speechless. Though I wanted to ask him why he hadn't told me sooner, I swallowed my words. I mustn't push my feelings on him. A fresh start somewhere else might be best for their healing. But after he hung up, the empty tone on the other end left me feeling so lonely. The house my younger son and his wife lived in was filled with memories of raising my 2 sons, despite my struggles with my drinking husband. On the day of the demolition, I found myself driving to my younger son's house. I just wanted one last look at it. When I arrived, the workers were just about to begin. Just in time. I'll at least take some photos. As I looked at the house through my phone's camera, I felt warmth fill my chest, and tears began to well up. Then, suddenly,
"Someone, help me."
I heard a little girl's voice from somewhere.
"Please, get me out of here."
The workers exchanged glances.
Did you just hear a kid's voice?
I looked around, thinking it might be a child from the neighborhood, but there was no one else in sight. I'm the homeowner's mother. "I'm sorry, but could you please stop the work for a moment?" I asked the workers to halt the demolition and carefully entered the house. "Is anyone there?" After calling out several times, I heard a faint sobbing coming from below. Thinking it was impossible, I made my way to the basement we used as a storage room when I lived there. Then, I heard someone knocking on the door from the inside. But the door wouldn't open because a new lock had been installed on the outside. It sounds like someone is in there, but it's locked from the outside. I asked the workers to break the lock, and when we went inside, there was a girl in tattered clothes. "What is this? Am I seeing things?" Thinking it must be an illusion, I doubted my own eyes. But there she was, my granddaughter, who had supposedly left this world 6 months ago. "Annabelle!"
It was so dark, and I was scared.
She whispered, clinging to me gently, and as I hugged her tightly, I could feel her warmth. There was a wound on her head that seemed to have bled, so I decided to take her to the hospital. In the car, I asked her what had happened, and she began to speak slowly. Hearing the shocking truth from her, I felt my entire body tremble with rage. There's no water in the basement, so maybe there's still something left. Looking at her small, thin hand, I thought of something. Once we reached the hospital, I explained the situation to the doctors and nurses. They advised me to report it to the police, so I made the call right there. The police arrived quickly and listened to my granddaughter's story, but they left, saying it was insufficient evidence.
I'm so tired.
After talking so much, Annabelle, receiving in 4, was exhausted. Since hospitalization wasn't necessary, I decided to take her home with me. As I looked at my call history to contact my elder son so Annabelle's sudden return wouldn't shock him, I realized something crucial. I then resolved to take action against the person who had hurt my precious granddaughter. A few days later in the evening, I called my younger son, who was overseas.
What is it, Mom? I'm busy trying to get used to work in a new place.
They found bones at your demolished house.
What?
Karma, my son, was clearly shocked, but after a moment, he started talking, as if suddenly remembering something.
Oh, right. After our dog passed away, I buried it in the yard. I'd completely forgotten.
You never told me about that.
Didn't think I needed to report every little thing to you.
Fair enough, but after you moved out, someone could have discarded human bones there. I'll report this to the police right away. As soon as I said that, Karma panicked.
Wait. Let me handle it myself.
He even insisted that I tell no one else. But you're overseas. You can't come back right away. I'll handle it myself.
No. Just hold off. I'm actually still in America because of work.
Oh, I see. Well, then, come over as soon as you can. Karma readily agreed, then asked if anyone else was at the house. I told him I was alone, which seemed to put him at ease. In less than 30 minutes after our call, my son showed up at my house. As I stood up from the living room sofa and showed him the bones stored in a bag, his face turned ghostly pale. Then, I heard a faint voice, "Help me," from what sounded like a young girl. Karma let out a scream, looking around frantically. Did you hear that? It sounded like Annabelle.
Did it?
Annabelle? Is that you? Then, a voice that sounded like my granddaughter echoed in the room. It's dark. I'm scared. Does she have something unfinished? I wonder. I murmured this, clasping my hands together in front of a candle. At that, Karma sat right next to me and started muttering something under his breath. So, these bones, they really are Annabelle's, aren't they? Did you do something? He only shook his head violently, unable to speak, but his panicked face was telling. Then, as if to push him further, my granddaughter's voice whispered again.
Daddy and Mommy locked me in the basement half a year ago.
This time, Karma shuddered and jumped up, visibly shaken. Seeing his reaction, I spoke gently to the candle. Annabelle, tell me. I heard from Daddy that you went to heaven while they were overseas at the beach. Before Karma could respond, Annabelle's voice resounded.
I was alive, but then, after Mommy and Daddy hit me, I don't remember much.
I was stunned, doubting what I'd just heard, and glared at my son. Karma, is this true? With cold sweat running down his face, He gave a weak nod. You harmed your own child?
No, there was more to it than that.
What terrible parents. Annabelle can't rest like this. Apologize to her, now.
I only helped. It was Crystal who started saying Annabelle was a nuisance.
The anger in me boiled over. There was no way my daughter-in-law would think her own daughter was unnecessary. This would never be resolved until I heard the truth from Crystal, so I told him to call her over. Karma seemed to realize he couldn't get away with this and, with trembling hands, took out his phone and called his wife.
Something serious has come up. Come over, now!
30 minutes later, Crystal arrived with my grandson, Bobby.
What is this all about?
We found Annabelle's bones at the house.
What?
I showed her the bones I had in hand. She covered her mouth, eyes widening, and at that moment, the room lights flickered off, and a voice came from behind them.
Mommy. Daddy.
The two slowly turned to see Annabelle standing quietly behind them. Karma and Crystal were shaking so hard they could barely stand. Worried about my grandson, I instinctively pulled Bobby closer to protect him. Then, Annabelle's tearful voice filled the room.
Mommy and Daddy said they didn't want me anymore.
But all they could do was press their hands together and cry out.
Annabelle, we're sorry. Please, move on.
You don't sound sincere. Apologize properly. At my sharp tone, they hung their heads, falling silent. Growing impatient, I pressed them both to tell me why they did this to Annabelle.
Girls aren't cute. And once Bobby was born, Annabelle didn't matter anymore.
Did Karma even have some grand inheritance or status worth protecting?
Not yet, but who knows what he might accomplish someday.
I could hardly believe she had such a ridiculous reason for treating Annabelle this way. Frustrated, I pulled out the remote and turned the lights back on. Enough. Annabelle told me the truth, and I believed her.
Wait, what are you talking about?
Annabelle is alive. I found her in the basement the day they tore down your house. Stunned, they were at a loss for words. I threw them a toy bone. And this? Just a little prop. The look of relief when they realized the bones were fake was obvious. That voice you heard? I recorded Annabelle's story on my phone. They looked away, faces distorted in shame. Stop lying to me. You never went overseas, did you? I know you were in America. Here's the proof. I showed them my call log, pointing out the lack of an international call code.
So what? Every family has its issues. Stay out of ours.
But Annabelle's fine. Isn't that enough?
Do you even understand? You should be grateful she's alive.
Right, now we're free from blame.
They were only thinking of themselves, as always. Annabelle shouted louder than ever before, "I hate you both," and ran off into the next room. Karma and Crystal clenched their jaws in anger.
Mom, you're going too far with this.
I could say the same to you. You tried to hurt Annabelle before you left, didn't you?
She wasn't moving, so I thought.
To harm a child? You're just like the father you hated so much. Karma's face twisted with rage, and he came toward me, seething.
I can't forgive you for tricking us.
You wouldn't have admitted it otherwise.
Just stop. Nothing terrible happened, after all.
Her confidence only confirmed her callousness. In case you missed it, locking Annabelle in the basement and hitting her are crimes.
Threats won't work. You don't have any evidence.
And those scratches, didn't they happen when you locked Annabelle in the basement? My question made both of them look at me in disbelief, tilting their heads as if to say, "What?" Annabelle had told me that when they tried to raise a hand against her, she fought back and scratched their arms. The basement didn't have running water, so she hadn't washed her hands. That meant DNA testing on the skin caught under her nails could serve as solid evidence. Once they investigate, it'll be clear as day that it was your doing. I pointed at the visible scratches on their arms, which made them murmur among themselves before heading toward the room where Annabelle had disappeared. Trying to destroy the evidence, are you? Too bad. The material under her nails has already been handed over to the police. When I was initially questioned at the hospital and told that evidence was insufficient, I had already consulted about conducting a DNA test. At my words, Karma and Crystal looked startled and sidled up to me.
Mom, it was all Crystal's plan.
No. Karma ordered me to do it.
What a pitiful sight, these two spouses blaming each other like that. Spare me. Every word you've said here has been recorded. The two of you are going to pay for your crimes in full. I declared in a loud voice, and then my eldest son and his wife stepped in, restraining the pair. Just then, we heard the sound of police sirens. My eldest son had already called them.
Mom, I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
Karma muttered with his head down, but to me, it no longer mattered. If you're sorry, apologize to the children. After what you've done, you're no son of mine. They collapsed to their knees, wailing. Soon after, the police arrived, and they were taken away. Annabelle, come here. It's all over now. I called to my granddaughter, who had been peeking out from the doorway. With a look of relief, she came forward, holding her younger brother Bobby's hand. Bobby, are you okay? They didn't hurt you while I was gone, did they? Bobby nodded earnestly, then let go of my arm to hug Annabelle tightly. Despite all their suffering, the two had looked out for each other, and I couldn't hold back my tears at their bond. Later, DNA from the skin under Annabelle's nails matched Karma and Crystal, and along with the recordings I'd made, they were found guilty. Further investigation revealed that they had also inflicted pain on Bobby under the guise of discipline. As a result, the two of them would be living behind bars for a long time. Meanwhile, a new chapter began for us. My eldest son and his wife expressed a desire to officially raise Annabelle and Bobby as their own children. I'd initially planned to care for them myself, but knowing the warmth of my eldest son's family, I felt certain they would bring happiness to the kids. So, I entrusted Annabelle and Bobby to them. The children quickly warmed up to their new parents and seemed happier each day. Watching them grow in such a loving home has been a blessing for me, too. How did you enjoy this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.